About halfway between West Egg and New York, the motor road hastily joins the railroad and runs beside it for a quarter of a mile, so as to shrink away from a certain desolate area planned. This is a valley of ashes, a fantastic farm where ashes grow like wood into ridges and hills and grotesque gardens, where ashes take the forms of houses and chimneys and rising smoke, and finally, with a transcendent effort, a man moved dimly and already crumbling through the powdery air. Occasionally, a line of cars cross a long invisible track, gives out a ghastly creak, and comes to rest. And immediately, the ash-green man swarmed with little spades and stirred on an impenetrable cloud which screens their obscure screens from your sight, obscure operations from your sight. But above the grey land, in the spasms of bleak dust, which drifts endlessly over you perceive, after a moment, the eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckerberg. The eyes of Dr. T.J. Eckerberg are blue and gigantic. The retinas are 1 yard high. They look out of no face, but instead, from a pair of enormous yellow spectacles, which pass over a non-existent nose. Evidently, some white vagabond monopolist set them there to fatten his practice in the borough of Queens, and then sank down himself into eternal blindness, or forgot them and moved away. But his eyes, dimmed a little by many days under sun and rain, by many painless days under sun and rain, were down over the solemn dumping ground. The Valley of Ashes is bounded on one side by a small far river, and when the drawbridge is up the left barges through, the passengers on waiting trains can stare at the scene for as long as half an hour. There's always a heart there over just a minute, and it was because of this that I first met Tom Buchanan's mistress. The fact that he had one was insisted upon wherever he was known. His acquaintances resented the fact that he turned up in popular restaurants with her aunt, leaving her at a table, standing about, chatting with whomsoever he knew. Though I was curious to see her, I had no desire to meet her, but I did. I went up to New York with Tom on the train one afternoon, and when we stopped by the ash heaps, he jumped to his feet and, taking hold of my elbow, literally forced me from the car. "You're getting off," he insisted. "I want you to be my girl." I think he tanked up a good deal at luncheon, and his determination to have my company bordered on violence. The supercilious assumption was that on Sunday afternoon I had nothing better to do. I followed him over a low whitewashed railroad fence, and we walked back 100 yards along the road under Dr. Eckerberg's procession stair. The only building inside was a small block of yellow brick sitting on the edge of the wasteland, a sort of compact main street ministering to it and contiguous to absolutely nothing. One of the three shops it contained was for rent, and another was an online restaurant approached by a trail access. The third was a garage, repairs, short bills, and car sport and soap, and I followed Tommy's side. The interior was unprosperous and bare. The only car visible was the dust-covered wreckable Ford which crouched in a dim corner. It had occurred to me that this shadow of a garage must be blind, and the sumptuous and romantic apartments were concealed overhead when the proprietor himself appeared in the door of an office, wiping his hands on a piece of waste. He was a blond, spiritless man, dynamic and faintly handsome. When he saw us, a damp gleam of hope sprang into his light blue eyes. "Hello, Wilson, old man," said Tom, slipping his shoulder, slipping jovially on the shoulder. "How's business?" "I can't complain," answered Wilson unconvincingly. "When are you going to send me the car?" "Next week. I've got my man working on it now." "Works pretty still, don't he?" "No, he doesn't," said Tom coldly. "And if you feel that way about it, maybe I'd better sell it somewhere else after all." "I don't mean that," explained Wilson quickly. "I just meant—" His eyes faced, his voice faded away. His voice faded, and Tom glanced impatiently around the garage. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs, and in a moment, the thickish figure of a woman emerged, blocked out the light from the office door. She was in the mid-30s and faintly stout, but she carried her surplus flesh sensuously as some women can. Her face, above a spotty dress of dark blue curtain sheen, contained no facet or gleam of beauty, but there was an immediately perceptible vitality, as if the nerves of her body were continually smoldering. She smiled slowly, and walking through her husband as if he were a ghost, shook hands with Tom. Looking a flush in the eye. Then she wet her lips, and without turning around, spoke to her husband in a soft, coarse voice. "Get some chairs, why don't you, so somebody can sit down?" "Oh, sure," agreed Wilson hurriedly, and went toward the lit office, mingling immediately with the cement color of the walls. A white ashen dust veiled his dark suit and his pale hair as it veiled everything in the vicinity, except his wife, who moved close to Tom. "I want to see you," said Tom instantly. "Get on the next train." "All right. I'll meet you by the next newsstand on the lower floor." She nodded and moved away from him just as George Wilson emerged with, with two chairs from his office door. We waited for her down the road and out of sight. It was a few days before the 4th of July, and a gray, scrawny Italian child was setting torpedoes in a row along the railroad track. "Terrible place, isn't it?" said Tom, exchanging a frown with Dr. Eckenberg. "Awful. It does her good to get away." "Doesn't our husband object?" "Listen, he thinks she goes to see her sister in New York. He's so dumb he doesn't know he's alive. So Tom Buchanan and his girl and I went up together to New York. Or not quite together, for Mrs. Weston sat discreetly in another car. Tom deferred that much to the sensibilities of those staggers might be on the train. She had changed her dress to a brown figured muslin which stretched tight over her rather wide hips as Tom helped her to the platform in New York. At the newsstand, she bought a copy of Town Tattle and a moving picture magazine, and in the station drugstore, some cold cream and a small flask of perfume. Upstairs, in the Salami coin drive, she let four taxicabs drive away before she selected a new one, lavender colored with grey upholstery. And in this, we see that from the mast of the station into the glowing sunshine. But immediately she turned sharply from the window and tapped on, and leaning forward, tapped on the front glass. I want to get one of those dogs, she said earnestly. I don't get one for the apartment. They're nice to have a dog. We backed up to a gray old man who bore an absurd resemblance to John D. Rockefeller. In a basket, swung from his neck, covered a dozen very recent puppy of indeterminate breed. What kind of day? Asked Mrs. Wilson eagerly as he came to the taxi window. All kinds. What kind do you want, lady? I want to get one of those police dogs. I don't suppose you got that kind?